Is there about to be a retained list shocker at West Ham? Good afternoon, all you wonderful West Ham fans. Welcome back to the West Ham Network. I'm Anton, as you can see by my name up there. Hope you are keeping safe and well as per usual. Now, listen, a little disclaimer as we do every single season, every single transfer window, you name it. Remember, I appreciate that we bring you as much news as we can from the West Ham world. We are not ITKs. We will never be ITKs. Well, you can never say that for such, but we're not an ITK. We don't proclaim to be an ITK. And what we do is report the news that comes out of the mainstream media, and then we try and dissect it and think, do we think there's any element of truth or not? So I can appreciate that you get some comments, that we get some comments that are saying, this is just, you're spinning it, you're spinning it, you're spinning it. Well, in actual fact, if you actually listen to the show, you will find that we don't tend to spin it, because we kind of sometimes take the mick out of the fact that West Ham are linked to 80 plus players and the transfer window isn't open. So there's a key part and key messaging here is don't believe everything until West Ham themselves announce it. So we bring out what is brought to you and we try and dissect it as much as we can and see if there's any element of truth or not on the basis of it. We don't have 9 times out of 10, we don't get the information. We sometimes get the information. We have people that do message us and we choose to run or not run with it. Probably 9 times out of 10, don't run with it because we don't know how truthful it can be. Some of the stories do end up being true and some of them don't. So there's your disclaimer before we start. Not everything you read in the press is true. Not everything you see on YouTube is true. But we try and bring it and we try and put a little bit of a spin on it and try to understand, is there an element of truth on it? So that's the starting point for you. That's the starting point for you. But anyway, if you are new around here, while you're here, hit the subscribe button because we're very close to 25,000 subscribers. We're very close to that number. So hit it. We're in June now. So I'd like you to get there, do that, 5 more K, and we get to the 30K number that we're looking for by the end of the year that's happening. Now, it's coming to that time of the year where West Ham fans are sitting waiting to find out what the retained list of West Ham is going to be. This time last year, we found out that Lanzini, of course, was leaving West Ham, which was disappointing to none other than Happy Hammerette. No, I'm only joking, Happy. I was quite sad as well to see Lanzini go. But there's been lots of rumours about loads of players coming into West Ham and lots of rumours about players heading out the door from West Ham. And we are expected this month to see the final retained list. Now, many clubs throughout the Premier League have already announced the retained list. So I don't actually understand why West Ham takes so long to release this information, but we're not the only club that hasn't done it yet. But clubs that have announced them have been Arsenal, just to name a few, Newcastle, Brentford, Everton, Nottingham Forest, and Luton Town. I mean, I think Arsenal have announced upwards of 22 players leaving, but remember, there is a lot of young players and players that are out of contract under the Arsenal squad. They do have a larger squad than West Ham as well. You do tend to find that clubs that have got a lot of players, had to bring them in, who got promoted last year, who've been relegated this year, will also release players. I think Luton Town have released 14, but we have received a bit of an update from good friend of the channel and a close source to the club, Sean Wheatston, who has said that obviously we do know that West Ham will be announcing our retained list in June, but he's given us a little bit of an update on some of those players. So the story, if you've watched it already this morning about Ben Johnson, is that what we're led to believe is that West Ham, I think you can work this one out yourself, right? Because Ben Johnson is a West Ham boy, he will probably be trying to push for a deal, a best deal he possibly can get. So I spoke to you about that one this morning. We're led to believe that he could be not retained and released because his contract is, of course, up this summer. So I am probably 75% sure he will be leaving the club, but I wouldn't be surprised if the club went back in with one more offer to try and tempt him to stay, especially if Lopetegui fancies giving him a shot in that position. So that one could be one of the players we expect to see. The next one we probably do expect to see with a high possibility that's leaving is Divine Mubama. Again, I will be really disappointed to see him go, but at the end of the day, he's going to be looking for specific wages, he's going to be looking for guarantees, and he's probably not going to get them at West Ham. And sometimes the best thing that these people can do, these players can do, is go make a career for themselves elsewhere. That is essential to their footballing career. I always go back to the story of when we had Lee Hodges on the channel. Lee Hodges and Frank Lampard at the time, both very, very good young players at West Ham. At the time, Lee Hodges was probably being a better youth player. However, Frank Lampard got his opportunity and Lee Hodges had to leave the club to go and build his best career. We've spoke about the youth progressing through to the first team, and it's few and far between about how many that actually do make it. So Mubama mustn't be there or where the club fancy him right now. So it looks like he probably will be heading out the door. And a mixture of that and finances are going to cause a bit of a problem. It looks like we'll be saying farewell to Augie as well. So that would be absolutely disappointing. Let me just have a look at this. So yeah, it'll be really disappointing to say goodbye to Augie, but also fruitful for West Ham, because I think the time was right to say goodbye to Ogbonna last season. To be honest, I don't think it was right to give him an extended contract. It'd be interesting to see what West Ham do with Ogbonna in terms of, is there a potential option to stay at the club, to coach, learn? You know, he's been in London for such a long time, been in Britain for a long time, and will he want to stay and be around the club, work with the youth teams? I don't know. Be interested to see if anything develops in this neck of the woods. Now, another player we expect to go out is Joseph Anang. He's been out on loan several times, came back to the club last year after breaking his arm, but we expect him to be released. Now, I've got a little bit of a bugbear when it comes to keepers, and we'll come on to another keeper in a second. Actually, do you know what? I'll go to another story first before I come back to all of the keepers. So the next one we do know is Dan Chesters. Dan Chesters himself announced that he was leaving the club. He put that out on his own social media platforms. The club haven't officially announced it. Again, being on loan to several clubs. Thought he was doing quite well. His trajectory was looking okay, actually, in the youth setup last year as well. But the decision was made to look like he was to be let go. So that was one player. Another player coming out of the traps that could be heading out of the club is Jacob Knightsbridge. That was the one that I think surprised quite a lot of people, to be honest with you, because I think they all thought he had a bright future at West Ham, especially being at the age, you know, representing England at under 17s level. And he's been at West Ham since he was 7 years old, but he's made it into the development team with the Premier League International Cup clash against Monaco back in February of 2023 as well. So the player was a quality player, but the problem, and this is where I come on to the goalkeepers at West Ham, is that many clubs around the world, in Europe and other European countries in particular, specifically like Italy and Spain, do actually utilize their youth keepers more than experience on the plate. So I've mentioned to you, Jacob Knightsbridge is heading out the door. Joseph Anang could be heading out the door. That still leaves Nathan Trott, who supposedly West Ham are very keen to be selling as well, because we've offered him, obviously, he's got a new contract at West Ham, and it looks like we could generate some fee because he's been doing really well on his loan move out of the club. We've got Areola as number one. We're looking for an experienced number three, but is that going to be an experienced number three? Because I want to talk to you about this guy here, Lucas Fabianski, because there are some stories coming out about saying that maybe, you know, as much as we've maybe looked at extending his deal for another year, he is 39 years old, and we don't have European football. So we've got 38 Premier League games and any domestic cups that we're in, and he is going to struggle for a lot of game time this year. Any game time. Obviously, we all know what could happen. We all know an injury could happen, and he could be catapulted into that setup. But it's a bit of a risk, especially at this time of your career, at this stage of your career. And he could go for a few more years yet, and he could be a number one somewhere. And at this age, you don't necessarily want to sit around and be the number two, unless you are like what Russ was talking about recently. You're a Scott Carson who's really at the tail end of your career, and it's a no-brainer to go and sit at Man City. So if West Ham are looking at keepers like Fotheringham, then what does that actually mean for Fabianski? So if we do extend his contract, which apparently we have, can we get an offer on the table for him and receive an actual piece of money, which could go towards our transfer kitty this summer? I think it's going to be so many different factors. Will an offer come in for Fabianski, and do we value his experience as the backup? And will he be happy playing second fiddle to Areola again for another season when we don't have as many games to play? So this is going to be an interesting one when this retain list is announced in due course. Be mindful of the fact that we don't know. We haven't been told this for a fact. We'll just have to wait and see what actually comes out. I think there'll be a few more names that we haven't mentioned here, but I expect Johnson, 75% chance he's probably going to leave. I think there's a 95% chance Mbama's going to leave. I think 100% chance, or 95, 99% chance Ogbona's going to leave. And Nang, Chester's has already announced he's going to leave. Knightsbridge is going to leave. But there could be an outside chance that Fabianski could be sold in this summer as well. So it's definitely one to keep an eye on as West Ham start to rebuild for this summer. But please remember, please remember that everything that is brought to you is not factual until it's officially announced at the West Ham website themselves. So we'll bring you some more news as we get it. Stay tuned. Keep your eyes peeled. Hit the thumbs up, leave a comment, and of course, subscribe to the channel. Come on, you wonderful Irons.